Everybody here looking for revival in our own hearts and across the land. Anybody looking for a revival, lift up your voice and say amen. Lift up your voice and say amen.
Good morning. It's time for our daily devotion. Today will be the last in our series of why we need revival. And today, when we talk about why we need revival, it is probably also one of the reasons why we resist revival, because we need revival because it exposes sin. It throws back the cover on the secret areas of our life and exposes those feelings, those attitudes, those habits, those things that we're doing in our life that are sinful, that separate us from God. And when real revival comes, we recognize sin as sin, we confess sin as sin, and we then go through the procedure of allowing God to heal us in those areas, to strengthen us in those areas, and to make us more what we should be as followers of Jesus Christ. It's an interesting thing. One of the great revivals of the late 20th century happened during the Jesus movement at Asbury College in Wilmore, Kentucky, just a few miles actually from where I pastor. And at Wilmore, Kentucky, one morning during the chapel service, a student was moved by the Spirit to get up and confess his sin to the student body. He got up and talked about attitudes he'd had, things he had said and done to students that wasn't right. And he basically confessed to the students and asked for their forgiveness. Well, God so honored that because other students then began to give up and confess their sin. Revival broke out, and that chapel service, which should have taken an hour, went on for weeks and even months. And God brought such revival to that campus because sin was exposed and confessed that revival spread to hundreds of college campuses all across America as those students went out and shared the story of what had happened at Asbury. That's what happens when real revival comes. When real revival comes, sin is exposed, sin is confessed, and then God begins to work in the lives of people he has not been able to work in before because of the sin in their life. It's one of the reasons, the most important reasons why we need revival, but it is also one of the most important reasons why we resist revival, because none of us are comfortable with that, are we? None of us are comfortable with that searchlight being shown into the corners of our life and exposing the darkness that's there. None of us are comfortable with that, and none of us are comfortable with confessing our sin to each other and asking people to forgive us. That makes us very, very uncomfortable, and so we resist revival because somehow in our spirit we know that when we get right with God, we're going to have to get right with other people. When God shows us the things that are wrong in our life, we're going to have to fess up. We're going to have to do something about it. We're going to have to make some changes. We're going to have to rely on God more. And so I'm admonishing you. I'm encouraging you today. I am begging you today. Do not resist revival because it causes us to have sin exposed in our life, but instead embrace and invite revival because it exposes sin in our life. For years, our family lived in a log home, and we loved it. But one of the worst things about living in the log home was because of the way it was built, because of where the windows were located, because of the fact that we were in the middle of 3 acres of woods and there wasn't a lot of sunlight that got to our house, inside the house was very dim, which didn't matter a whole lot most of the time. But a lot of times we would come out to go to church and my wife would look at me and she'd say, what were you thinking? You put those two colors together, or what's all over your shirt, or what's all over your suit jacket. And the problem was in the dimness of the house, I couldn't see any of those things. Didn't get a true picture of what the colors were like, and I couldn't see the stains that might be on my clothes. And so when I got onto the bright sunlight, I saw those things that I couldn't see before. That's exactly what happens when revival comes. It brings us out into the light as we draw closer and closer to God. The light of His presence exposes those stains and those sins, those attitudes, those habits, those things in our life that shouldn't be there, and then we have to deal with it. It'd be easy to stay in the shadows and in the dark log home all the time and never have to deal with it. But folks, listen, there's nothing like living in the sunlight. There's nothing like coming out into the presence of God and having all of that exposed so that it can be dealt with and forgiven, and so that we can walk in the light. When I was growing up, we used to sing an old hymn, Heavenly Sunlight, Heavenly Sunlight. That's what we need. We need revival. So don't resist revival. Embrace it and allow God to show you in your life those areas that need to be dealt with so that you can walk closer to Him than you ever have before. Let's have revival. Go make it a great day, and I'll see you next time.
In our own hearts and across the land. Anybody looking for a revival, lift up your voice and say